Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the stream sessions for the 2022 National Landcare Conference. We're in the Environment and Climate Change stream, and today we'll be having two presenters, one's online and one's here in real life. So we're starting with Timothy Watts, and then Craig Carter will come up and present on restoring, protecting and rehydrating Upper Mooki Catchment. So over to you, Tim. We're just not getting your sound through, Tim, so just hold on a second.
How about that? Any good?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Ah, that's a lot better. Okay, beauty. Look, just as introduction, the Landcare Conference, I was actually at the initial Landcare with Rick Farley and Philip Toyne. Now, that was 30 odd years ago. Just a quick show of hands, how many other people were there? Keep your hand up if you've got a T-shirt there too, because I missed out and I was a bit disappointed about that. But yeah, no, that's certainly come a long way from there. Let's go here. Righto. So it's the Mooki rather than Mooki, restoring, protecting and rehydrating the Upper Mooki Catchment, which is in Gamilaroi country. So Yama from Gamilaroi country. Look, this is me and Moses down in the bulrushes, and the more astute amongst you will realise they're not actually bulrushes, it's Phragmites, the saviour of the Australian river system. Unfortunately, they are edible. So look, that's sort of part of what we're doing. I'm sure Craig will probably talk more about this. This is a joint presentation. I'm doing the how and why, and Craig is going to talk about the magic of how. So where and why, Craig's doing how. Righto, where are we? Now, everybody's heard of Tamworth, no doubt, being the first city with electric lights. We're just south of Tamworth in the Corindai area, onto the Liverpool Plains, Liverpool Ranges. So our area goes from the top of these ranges here, which are up around 1,000 metres above sea level, and rapidly get down to the plains at 400 or 500 metres. The early development in the area, grazing went over the whole area, but the cultivation was actually along the ridges because the black soil was too hard for them to cultivate. So a lot of this area was cultivated, and then now with bigger machinery, all the floodplain is cultivated. Look, about 30 years ago, I got to fly over the whole region with the weeds officer. Now, we flew all of these drainage lines, and I must confess it was some of the most depressing 2 days of my life, because in the upper catchment, it was grazed to almost bare ground. And as you went down the systems, I'm thinking it's going to improve, but it was actually cultivated right up to the edges and in some places right across. And so that was, I suppose that was a bit of an initiator thinking, something's out of kilter here. What happened then is that we lost a lot of that sort of retention in the catchment, loss of chain of ponds. Also, there was a lot of soil erosion and flooding became a major issue. And following a few wet winters back in the early 90s, salinity was identified as a major issue, which was good because there's money involved when you start talking salinity. So I was in a soil con at the time, and we employed a New Zealand hydrogeomorphologist to map water levels and look to see what the water was actually doing. Now, she described these streams, they're high energy streams, and she described them as incontinent streams. I thought it was wonderful. I just picture these streams hurtling out of the hills and just letting go on the floodplains. Now, she actually had a New Zealand accent, and it was incomplete, which I guess is also not a bad term. But anyway, that's pretty much what these streams were doing. Now, a series of floodplain studies were then undertaken, mainly to try and coordinate the drainage through the floodplain areas because inundation was seen to be a bad thing. And the reason for these was to coordinate the flow, but also to avoid potential court cases between neighbours. And you remember Mark Twain, scotches for drinking and waters for fighting over, and there were some fairly major issues. A lot of discussion as to where all this water was coming from and why it was coming so fast. And there was a real demarcation between the hill tribes and the flat earthers. It was about this time, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, probably 15 years ago, that Craig bought into the area, somebody coming in with new ideas. And I'd have to sort of acknowledge him perhaps as the catalyst for change, that he was looking at different ways of doing things. This project represents the first large-scale attempt to improve the infiltration in the upper catchment and try to get it functioning more like a sponge that it did prior to overgrazing and cultivation. It currently involves 13 properties over an area of 28,000 hectares. We've got a really good film, and hopefully Craig's going to talk to about it. And as Molly Meldrum would say, do yourself a favour and have a look at it. Before I hand over to Craig, I'd just like to say we were supposed to have a message that you could take home. So my message is ground cover, okay? Got to remember ground cover. That's the most important thing. For a project like this to work, you've got to have a bit of passion. And I think when you see Craig and Nikki, they are passion personified. You know, so a bit of passion and some funding from Catchment Action New South Wales and NLP got this project up and running. How's that, Craig? Are you ready to go? Pass the baton over quickly. Yep, there he is. I'll get out of it.
Thanks very much, Tim. I'm the straight man to the comedian. This all started after we had 70 mils of rain on the 31st of March 2019, which some of you might remember was a bit of a dry patch. On the Tuesday, which was the 2nd or 3rd of April, the manager of Windy Station, which is about 12 kilometres as the creek flows downstream, rang and said, "Where did all the water come from?" I said, "What's your problem?" He said, "I've just looked out the kitchen window. The Yarraman Creek flats are flooded." I said, "Well, I got 70 mils of rain on Sunday night. What did you do?" And he said, "I didn't see a drop." And he said, "Oh, can we manage this?" I rubbed my hands together and I thought, victory. My next phone call was to Tim. We've got them. Windy Station is the biggest landholder on the creek. Of our 28,000 hectares, they represent 20,000. So they are a significant player. So really, are we working? Good. Hang on. What have you done to me? The next presentation. Here we go. Here's the two good-looking fellas back in the creek again. I don't know who the pixie is. I'm obviously the one in the big hat and the fat belly. Phragmites is a wonderful plant. It is Australia's equivalent to the beaver. It is also highly, highly palatable to cattle and sheep. And the reason that we lost a lot out of a lot of these creeks is because of cattle and sheep and mismanagement grazing. We've managed to get it back. We've lost a little bit in this winter, but I think we'll be pretty right this summer. It's a warm season grass. That's the only way you can think of it. You've got to treat it like that. I'll just skip through Tim's slides. Okay. In Australian agriculture, a quote from Terry McCosker, a man who's probably had a greater impact on the Australian environment than anyone else. If you're not in a drought, you're recovering from one or you're preparing for the next one. And that's what this is all about. So why do we do rehydration? We want to reduce the erosion. We have so many incised gullies that have just disconnected floodplains. So the water is just going like a luge. The headwaters of the Yarraman Creek are at 900 metres. Our house is at 400 metres. It's 10 kilometres. To go the next 400 metres downstream, it meets the Southern Ocean at the Coorong. That's just a bit more than 10 k's. We want to improve our water quality and quantity. We've got to look to increase our biodiversity, which we've heard all day today. We want to increase our infiltration rates. A 1% increase in your organic matter is about 140 to 150,000 litres per hectare in our environment. That's quite a bit of rainfall. Now, if you can hold that, and as someone said, how much rain do you get? The lot. If you can hold as much of that water as you can, it will seep out slowly, but it will stay for a long time. That starts to build and improve our soil health. Yet another topic for this morning, and a very passionate presentation by Victor Stephenson for those of you who saw him. And just to take something from the man who's Minister for Everything, or the man of many ministries, we need to flatten the curve. But the curve I'm talking about is the hydrographic curve. Up until a few months ago, when we had a flow event, it went up, high peak water, down, and then trickle. Now, because of some of the work that we've done, some of the changes that have occurred, we are now in a position where we didn't get anywhere near the high peak flow. We got a pretty big one, but now it's just constantly flowing. It's the longest time in the 20 odd years that I've been on the creek that it has continually flowed. We are flattening the hydrographic curve. Soil health. These are concepts that you'll often see Gabe Brown, Alan Williams talking about. We had the pleasure of hosting Gabe in 2016. Al threw the first one in, which is understand your landscape goals and context. There is no point in trying to turn the Chihuahua Desert into the rainforest of Borneo. It's not going to happen. Learn what you can do with your landscape. Maintain a diverse perennial plant community. And notice I said plant, not grass, plant. You've got herbs, forbs, native flowers. Christine Jones said at a presentation some years ago, you'll know your country's healthy when you get a purple haze in November of chocolate lilies. One of my mentees rang me one day and said, why do you call them chocolate lilies? I said, why? She said, because they taste awful. I said, have a sniff, they smell beautiful. Integrate well-managed livestock into your system. Why do I use the term well-managed? Tim spoke about the set stocking that used to happen on the ridges and on the plains. They denuded the landscape. We have a lot more cattle than I was told I'd ever be able to carry on the place, but we move them daily. They only terrorise a paddock 4 days a year, and then they move on, and it's not 4 consecutive days. Have as little disturbance of your soil as possible, and Victor emphasised this in his presentation. So the how-tos. We need to slow the water down. And how do you do that? You slow it down with those perennial grasses. The water will soak in through the root systems. It will slow down trying to work its way through the litter, through the tussocks, and all that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, that's where the bulk of the water falls. It doesn't fall in the gullies, it doesn't fall in the creeks. It falls on your landscape. So slow the flow. Maximise your animal impact. In other words, get a bigger mob and lots of smaller paddocks. And use minimal engineering because it costs a lot. And, with the price of diesel at about $2 a litre, it's going to cost a lot more. And that's a photograph we took some years ago, but it's representative of how things can look in a season where we get some sunlight. There's some of the water slowing that we've been doing. I forgot that slide was there. These are drainage lines put in by the best practice of soil conservation in the 60s, 70s and 80s. In the 2000s, we took an excavator and we did that. And by doing that, all the flows that were going off the land and into the gullies, better one gully than 100, is now spreading out over the landscape. And that is having a really tremendous effect. And how am I going for time? Okay, now, as we said, do yourself a favour. Take a photograph of that screen. Go and look at those videos. They are fantastic. Constructing swales in the landscape. These two, the last two, the first one's about the whole project. It's a whole pile of the various participants being interviewed on some of the work that was done. Constructing swales in the landscape is a bit of a how-to. It's a get the guys with soil con and your levels and your dumpies and all that sort of gear and how to measure it all out. Rehabilitating big jacks is another on the same place. These are fantastic videos done by Susanna Cowley and I forget who did the ones on Rogers. So our take-home message, ground cover, ground cover, ground cover. If you've got greater than 70% ground cover, that's going to take your soil erosion away. Aim for actively growing perennials, which is both warm and cool season grasses. You know, we see a lot of people putting in subtropicals and thinking, yahoo, wow, we're coping with climate change, and they've got no winter feed. Aim for 100% ground cover 100% of the time. And if you can achieve all of that, you've slowed the flow of the water in your landscape. And then if we go and look at other things like incised gullies and creeks, that's a whole nother conversation. So that's why we've done what we've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig and Timothy, for your presentation. We've got online delegates who can send in some questions if they'd like, but also in the room, just throw your hand up if you've got questions. Is Timothy still on the line? Or yep, there he is. Great. Any questions for them? Yep.
You had those original pictures of the gullies. You didn't have to fence any off, you just changed your practices and put more fencing in and rotated, and you didn't need to fence off your gullies to help them out?
We haven't fenced the gullies off. Where we've got, for argument's sake, an old flow line that might have been 20, 30, 40 metres wide with an incised gully down the middle of it, what we've done in those, and one of the things that I need to mention is, once you start playing with the earth-moving stuff, apart from it being expensive, if you have a failure, it can be a disaster. So what we do is what I call safe-to-fail trials. So we were putting in small check banks so that the spillway would spill the water in such a way that it would flow to the outer edge of that flow line. Bring it back in, put it into the next dam, and we've done 3 or 4 of those on one of the gullies at home. It's worked well. Now I've just got to build the project, the next stage of the project, to do heaps more of them. We've got some that we're waiting on one of the last participants to finish, and Tim and I are rather hoping it works well because it's a slightly bigger scale than the ones we did at home. But they're the sorts of... Go, Tim.
Just the major drainage lines through there have in fact been fenced, and I think what Craig's very reluctant to say that it's not the fencing that's important, it's the management of those riparian areas. Now, we have put a lot of off-stream water and fencing, which is the usual way, but it's the emphasis on grazing management is the big thing. And, you know, we've talked about the Phragmites and how edible they are. You know, a lot of the good species through there are missing because of that overgrazing. So being able to treat it as a special area, because it's a wonderful area with different plants to the rest of the property. And, you know, yes, fencing is actually an important technique of being able to manage that area, but grazing of it is also important.
But it's all I've used one-wire fencing. So.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Great. Well, thank you very much for...
Oh, hang on. Well,
there is one. Sorry.
There's our starring filmmaker.
Hold on a second, just for our online delegates. Get you go through the mic.
I just want to say hi to these wonderful people, Craig and Tim. I was so inspired to be up there and meeting all the wonderful landholders that are a part of this project and the inspiring community that made it happen. My question is, how are you seeing your project inspire the district, the Liverpool Plains and further afield?
Fantastic question, and I didn't pay you. Okay, I canvassed the participants in the Upper Mooki Rehydration project, and this was, I could tell you a bit of a final story about how it actually happened, because Tim said at a workshop that was all, I was getting a bit worried it was all feathers and no chook. And he said, wait a minute, don't anybody go anywhere, I have a vision. Oh, this is going to be good. He said, we're going to rehydrate the Upper Mooki Valley, tell me if I'm wrong. And everybody was so stunned they didn't know what he meant, and he said, oh, nobody's disagreed, so you all must think it's a good idea. At which everybody went, oh, yeah. And he said, see Craig. That's how it happened. I think of the 11 participating farming organisations or people, I think 10 of us want to go again, which to me...
Craig, oh, you're right, yeah. There was a bit more to that. We also chose a venue, because in trying to get people involved, you know, you've got to get them off the farm and give them something that you know, they're prepared to come to. So we chose Windy Station Woolshed, which it's a 45 stand woolshed. You know, people came just to see the woolshed. We also put on some pretty decent food, so that helped. But you know, because your question is actually really, you know, input. How do you actually get those people initially involved? And I get back to it does require a bit of passion, and it needs somebody that you know, gets knocked down a few times, but gets back up again and gets back into it and believes in what they're doing. But yeah, that was our initiator, and yeah, it's certainly grown from there, Suzanne. And your film, which we weren't allowed to show because we couldn't put in the PowerPoint, supposedly, wearing, you know, it's just been marvellous. We've used it on many occasions.
So in essence, I am planning Upper Mooki Stage 2, and all the participants, those that want to play, of the 11, those that want to play, there's 10 of them. Karen?
I think we're actually out of time, sorry.
Sorry.
If you've got it in, if you can do it in 2 minutes.
Thanks, Craig. And Tim, great presentation, thank you. Did you have access to a local landcare coordinator to assist you with the whole process?
We most certainly did. We had lots of assistance from Lana and Penny, and also Anne Coote, who was the Northwest Ralph for the northwest part of the area, who chaired and who else did we have on the team? We had help from all sorts of people, which was really fantastic. And I think that's part of the reason why Upper Mooki is up for an award tonight. So keep your fingers crossed for us.
Thank you very much for your wonderful story, and what an inspiration that project is, and good luck with the awards tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.